So I've been a FNAF fan since the third game came out. I know that's a weird place to jump into the franchise, but whatever. I even remember Markiplier playing FNAF 4 when it dropped, so I was there the day.
Was that the bite of 87?
What I'm getting at is I've always been like super duper invested in this franchise to the point where like people think I'm cringe or whatever. But there was always something that was like keeping me from putting together my own theory videos, like so much of the community has been doing. Mostly I just didn't have faith in my evidence gathering abilities, but now after like 6-ish years of just consuming FNAF content, and as the franchise has changed and evolved, so have I. And I'm thinking I'm ready now. With Security Breach and its Ruined DLC presenting a lot of unanswered questions, I think I want to talk about a few of them today. But before I start, I just want to say please don't flame me in the comments. That would be incredibly frustrating for a first theory video, and I'm so easily baited, it's not even funny. But with that aside, without any further ado, let's start talking about what I think happened in Security Breach's Ruined DLC. I want to start by talking about Tales games, because I think its prevalence in the community says a lot about the aggregate age of FNAF fans. For those who don't know, Tales games is basically the theory that the Tales from the Pizzaplex books, and maybe even the other Fazbear Frights, it's really not clear where a lot of people draw the line, but at least the Tales from the Pizzaplex books, the theory that those sort of coincide with the games and they're both canon to each other, and the books like directly depict events happening within the games. I think there's a lot of eagerness to take the books as canon, because a lot of kids are reading these books in school, and they enjoy the stories that those books tell. And when people call them non-canon, it makes those books feel unimportant, and so they've developed this sort of need to cling on to the books and, I guess, justify their enjoyment of them by calling them canon. People like to point at a now-removed Scholastic description, because Scholastic said that its description was removed for marketing reasons rather than inaccuracy. And though I could not find the original description, I could find the email where they reiterate what was in that description. I've seen this email propagated over the internet way more than the original description, so if someone has that description and it is somehow different to the wording of this email, let me know. I am going to be going into specifics as to the wording of the email, because they specifically say that it's set in the world of the games, which is not the same as saying that something is canon. For example, Shrek's Super Party for the Nintendo GameCube is set in the world of Shrek, but I don't think anyone's clamoring to say that it takes place between Shrek 3 and Shrek 2 Electric Go Fuck Yourself. Anything FNAF related is going to be set in the world of the games. That's just how a franchise works. And that's not even to mention all the inconsistencies between the book's portrayal of pretty much anything compared to the game counterparts. Like, for example, let me just go through the list I wrote up. The Mimic associates heavily with tigers, however there's nothing even remotely representing that in Ruin. The closest thing we get is like a lion costume. There's also supposed to be a giant tree in the middle of the Pizzaplex. That was never there in Ruin or the original Security Breach. The Mimic in the Tales from the Pizzaplex novels is also way more sentient and capable of like interacting with people, whereas the only thing we see the Mimic do in the game is mimic.
You saved me. Gregory? I'm Gregory.
And then there's just also like a bunch of different named characters in the book that are different from the game counterparts, but like occupy the same roles within the narrative. There's just a lot with these books that can't possibly apply to the games. It would break the canon. And because I don't want to like massively try and rewrite the whole timeline in order to justify these books, I'm just going to say that they're not canon. It makes things a lot easier. Now with that out of the way, I can talk about the thing that I actually came here to talk about and what I really care about. Let's start with a particularly easy question. Who's Cassie? Well, she's a small girl with short brown hair tied into pigtails. She's friends with, or at least she knows, Gregory, and her dad works for Fazbear's Entertainment. And one other detail I want to call out was that Roxy says she was number 1 twice. I want to focus on that last part here because it doesn't really seem like any other theorist has brought it up in their discussions, and while it could just be a piece of throwaway dialogue, the amount of emphasis that is placed on that line in Roxy's delivery feels super weird to me.
I remember because you are number one. Twice.
Now, what if Cassie is a robot? So she's number one twice because she celebrated her first birthday party twice. That would also explain why the Mimic, and to a lesser extent Gregory, have an interest in Cassie. She's a robot that's far more sophisticated than the Mimic is, which is why the Mimic wants to lure her down there, because she is the next logical step for the Mimic to mimic a human. Now, I know that's not enough to go on alone, but I wanted to set up the possibility of her being a robot before I dive into who I think she actually is, because I think they sort of go hand in hand with each other. Remember when I said that Cassie's a small girl with short brown hair tied into pigtails and she has a dad working for Fazbear Entertainment? Well, we actually have another character in this franchise who fits that description incredibly well. Charlie, from the Silver Eyes novels. One of the things that I haven't heard many people talk about are these pins that Cassie wears and what they might mean. If we look closely, we can see two familiar color patterns, a dark purple and a bright green. These are the same two colors that have been appearing on the Security Breach TV website logos, the same two colors that people thought would have a lot to do with this game. Specifically, people have been theorizing that these two colors symbolize William Afton and Charlie respectively. Now, what could that mean here? Green is obvious, we already said it symbolizes Charlie, and I already think that Cassie could be a robot version of Charlie, so this almost seems one-to-one. But what about the purple? Well, if we look at the position of the stars, the purple one is lopsided, and it's kind of behind the green one, almost like it's looming over it. In a way, it kind of reminds me of the way Afton stands behind his victim in the Take Cake minigame way back in FNAF 2. It's even on the exact same side. Hey guys, so we were editing the video and we realized that I had left a mistake in the script. William Afton is definitely not on the correct side here. I don't know why I thought he was, but I do still think that this is a weird detail worth pointing out. I don't think it's necessarily 100% on the money, I just think it's weird and kind of leads credence to my theory. Here's a question I don't see a lot of people asking. If Cassie didn't pick up the walkie-talkie until after she entered the Pizzaplex, how did she know that Gregory needed help in the first place? Well, we got the answer to this in the Twisted Ones. Popular YouTuber and theorist FNAF pointed out that this novel in particular holds a lot of similarities with Ruin. And how is Charlie lured to the basement in the Silver Eyes trilogy? Well, we actually don't find out until the fourth closet, but it ends up being revealed that Circus Baby called her there by pretending to be Sammy. And I'll be honest, a lot of this stuff isn't particularly compelling in its own right, but I think that when you view the game through the lens of Cassie being a Charlie robot, a lot of the strange stuff in Ruin starts to make sense. But if you're able to suspend your disbelief this far, buckle in, because I think I have more evidence for this next part of my theory, but I also think that it's going to ruffle way more feathers than any Charlie bot theory that I could come up with. But before that, I need to talk about everyone's least favorite FNAF game. FNAF World. A lot of people don't like to talk about FNAF World for a lot of reasons. The launch left a bad taste in people's mouths, it's just not what they were looking for after FNAF 4, and let's be real, it's a weird fucking game. But I think that the game's worth analyzing because, for one, Scott has gone on record saying that FNAF World is the game he regrets making canon the most.
You know, I should have just done something that was obviously for fun and not tried to somehow tie it in to a canon game.
But for another thing, it introduces a lot of ideas that would later become expanded on and elaborated in the series. It's the first game that features Henry, first of all, and it's also the first canon appearance of Circus Baby. So, why do I want to talk about FNAF World so badly anyway? Well, I wanted to look at the cutscenes that Henry is featured in. The first two are pretty vague, but I think they seem to be referencing the state of events at the time we're seeing Henry in. He seems to be at his lowest, he keeps mentioning, everything being a mess. But then, you look at this last one, the one you see after Chica's Magic Rainbow. Unlike the vast majority of FNAF World cutscenes, the cutscenes with Henry Deskman here feel so literal. What I mean by this is, a lot of FNAF World's cutscenes are just kind of nonsense or cryptically hinting at gameplay things, rather than broader story implications. You're supposed to take these cutscenes and sort of examine the crypticness and see how that might apply to the series. In contrast with that, the Deskman cutscenes just feel a lot more grounded and different tonally. So I want you guys to think here. When does this cutscene happen? Because Henry dies in this cutscene, not during the FNAF 6 fire. It shows him explicitly being killed by Circus Baby. So where would this take place? The only logical explanation to me seems to be that this happened after the FNAF 6 fire. And I know what you're thinking, you know, how did Henry survive it? Well, what if he failed? What if somebody stopped him? Let's think back to that third cutscene for a second. Henry seems upset. What are you doing here? Can't you see that I'm busy? All of these lines in the cutscene make a lot of sense if you think about them in the context of Henry trying to explain his plan. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't want to disappoint people. And then it says someone deactivated his games. What games? Even in the context of FNAF World, that line always stuck out to me. It doesn't make sense. Well, what if it's talking about his plan to end it all, to burn down the FNAF 6 pizzeria? Need more proof? Let's look at FNAF 6's location as we see it in Security Breach. It's pretty disheveled, sure, but does it look burnt to you? Nothing about this location makes it seem like it was set on fire, it just looks abandoned. Even Candy Cadet, who's rusted and deactivated, doesn't seem to actually be burnt. What about another animatronic that appears in Security Breach? One way more prominently featured. Music Man. Music Man looks completely undamaged. I haven't seen anyone talk about this either. It just seems like a really weird animatronic to rebuild and feature prominently, so the only conclusion I can come to is that it was never destroyed in the first place. I think Steel Wool, including Music Man, was a conscious attempt at them getting us to think about the FNAF 6 fire and that it might not have happened the way we thought it did. So, if I think Henry failed, and Baby doesn't seem to be in the blob, then where is she? Well, hey, for no reason at all, let's just run down the list of the Mimic's characteristics. The Mimic can mimic voices, duh. It lies in order to manipulate people and get what it wants, and it's heavily associated with yellow eyes. Both its model and Helpy have these pale yellow eyes. Does that sound familiar? Because it should. Baby can mimic voices and often lies to manipulate others. Now, I know what you're thinking. Baby never had yellow eyes. They've always been blue pre-Elizabeth and green post-Elizabeth. But let's look at that Deskman cutscene again. When we hear Baby's voice, all we see are her eyes. And what color do we actually see? A pale yellow. Now, I know what you're thinking, the yellows are not exactly one-to-one. I get that, it is a little bit of a flaw in the theory here, but I think that that's something that seems to happen a lot in this franchise. For example, when Purple Guy was first introduced, he was a much brighter shade, and so you had a lot of people, you know, debating whether or not there were two killers, and one was Purple Guy and one was Pink. But, you know, in reality, it was just Scott making design changes. It happens. It's a franchise with a lot of installments. Things are bound to get changed from game to game. This even explains why Baby is interested in Cassie. If Cassie's a Charlie bot like I think, and Henry really did build Baby to be a Charlie bot in the first place, then the Mimic wants Cassie because it sees her as an upgrade. It's what the Mimic could never become. And this is exactly what happens in the fourth Closet novel. Baby wanting to replace Charlie and take the life that she felt she was supposed to have. In the end, Ruin is a story about a forsaken and forgotten project, sealed away but desperate to get the life it was promised. Baby couldn't be burnt. Henry had failed and paid for it with his life. Baby couldn't be deactivated either. It was too late. But she was still falling apart. She could be sealed, deep beneath the location, never to escape. But Baby's smart. She's always been so good at pretending, and there were plenty of unsecured animatronic parts she could loot from. So she lay dormant, waiting for her chance, waiting to get rid of the Mexis system and escape. So that was my very first FNAF theory. I know there were some holes here and there, and hopefully as this video goes up, I'll have some time to sit and iron things out better for a follow-up video down the line. Please like, comment, subscribe, do all the good things that people do, and I will see you guys hopefully in my next video.